Our next session is super exciting. I'm happy to welcome the Executive Director, Multicultural Client Strategy at Morgan Stanley, Alice Vilma, on stage, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Female Coaching, Shelley Zalis. Welcome, ladies. Take your seats. Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Hola, ¿cómo está? Bien. Todo bueno. Con buen día. Con mucho gusto. So, hello. We're trying to get everyone to get excited about the fact that we've got two fabulous women on the stage here, but I don't hear enough energy in the room. I can't see you. So, give it up. Let's go. It's a lot more fun, and we will break the rules a lot more, and I won't ask any questions on this page if you all give us back that energy from the audience. It makes it a lot more fun. And also we'll make this a little more interactive, because I just met you, but you had me at hello because I think you're so incredibly interesting. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go off script.
Works for me.
And we're just going to have a great conversation. So can you tell us, first of all, who you are, what you do, and I think we all want to know you a little more personally. So tell me your most favorite gift you've received that cost under $100.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name's Alice Vilma. I'm a managing director at Morgan Stanley. I lead an innovation lab at Morgan Stanley where we are an accelerator for tech and tech-enabled companies with multicultural and or women founders. So I've been at Morgan Stanley about 12 years now. My entire career has been in investment banking and capital markets, and so this innovation lab is actually near and dear to my heart because it was a labor of love, if you will, that allowed me to take my current skill set and apply it to something that I'm pretty passionate about. So that's a great thing. A gift that I have gotten that I really, really liked, it's a funny story. So it's very recent, actually. I hate Secret Santa. I hate Secret Santa at work because it's always like some gift card to Starbucks or something that you don't need. And you
re-gift?
Yes.
Okay.
Shamelessly.
Just asking.
Shamelessly, actually. And so we were having the Secret Santa, and everybody's gift had to be less than $50. So I was kind of like, okay, I don't know how that's going to work. And so I must say, some of my gifts were, relatively less thoughtful than others. But I received from another colleague of mine a German cookbook. And it's the best gift ever because, first of all, I said, why did you get me this German cookbook? She said, because I know you're learning German. So I'm learning German. And so she said, if you're going to speak German, you might as well learn about the culture and try maybe cooking some of the foods. And she knows that I like to cook. And so I was like, this is so awesome. So it's on my coffee table. I love it. I've made a bread.
I can't cook for the life of me. I can't even get a cake out of a pan. It's like I keep trying. It just doesn't come out. So I do buy great cupcakes and put them on. I display them very nicely. So it feels homemade in some way. No judgment. I like that. So, here we are talking about technology and innovation. And I think one of the greatest challenges that we have today, and I'm actually getting sick of talking about this, to be perfectly honest, is the wage gap. And there's obviously a tremendous wage gap in technology today. Yep. What's your thoughts about that? Like, why the heck is there a wage gap? And I think even for the Latin American community, for women in particular, it's 3 strikes against you. It's bad enough if you're a woman, 79 cents on the dollar. That's for a white woman. And then if you're a black woman, I think it's about 74 cents on the dollar. And for Latina, I think it's about 69 cents on the dollar. I mean, that sucks. Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think I always try to look at controversial issues from both sides. And sometimes I get more emotional about it, and sometimes I'm not. And when I'm more emotional about it, I just walk away from the conversation because I can't really think about it rationally. But if I try to think about what people are thinking, one of the areas that they go is, okay, you've had this base salary, and so you go in, I say, what's your base? And then I give you X amount plus your base. And that doesn't really help the situation. It actually sometimes stresses that particular situation. And so it's interesting because I was reading very recently, and I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier. So the CEO of Salesforce just said, you want to know how I closed the wage gap? I just closed it. That's it. So I said, what are the salaries? We're done. We bring them up and we're done.
Bam.
That's it. That's it. And so I think it's, and then you read it, was like, well, that was easy. Of course, so you just close it. That's it. You just close it. And so I think that New York, where we're both living, is I guess, a leader in this because they're saying now we're not able to ask what your job history has been. I work at Morgan Stanley, as I've mentioned. We've changed a lot of our HR practices with respect to, and I can't go into detail because I don't work in HR, quite frankly, but I do know that they've changed practices with respect to asking about historic compensation. So I hope that continues to go and change the wage gap, but you just close it, and it's leadership from the top.
So the CEO of Salesforce, his name is Mark Benioff, and he decided, he calls it the one button push, just because we're in technology. Pushed the button, found the inequity. It was $3 million. He closed it and swore he would never do that again. And then, of course, he started acquiring a ton of companies with a wage gap. So he is definitely walking the talk and continuing down that path, which is, quite remarkable. I think the biggest, thing that you raise really with the past performance, and now, thank God, a law just came out. Women in general are paid based on past performance and men on potential.
Right.
And so what advice do you give to people in general when they're negotiating? So we can't ask anymore, what did you make? But if someone wants to know what they should be paid, what advice do you give someone?
Research is your best friend. That's number one. You definitely need to know where the market is, and you need to know what value you're bringing to a role that would allow you to receive the compensation that's market. That's number one. And the other thing that I say, and this is information that's been given to me, don't be shy about your value. Period, finish, end of story. Period, finish, end of story. So this is what market is, this is what I'm bringing to the firm, and this is what I expect. And you have to be willing to, back to your point, walk that walk a little bit and say, I won't work here if that's not what I need. I mean, again, it sounds so simple, but when you put it into practice, and I know sometimes it's hard to talk about money and no one wants to talk about it, but at the end of the day, it's your career, your wealth, your job and livelihood on the line. So that should be something that we're all very comfortable talking about. As much as we're comfortable talking about how much value we bring to a company, you need to also be able to take that value back.
How many people do you have working for you?
We have a team, a very nice team of 6.
6, men and women?
Actually, we are very heavy women right now.
Oh.
We're almost 100% women at this point.
Wow. Was that conscious, or did that just happen? Or?
That's kind of the way it rolled. We had we had 2 men in our group who one ended up going to business school, Harvard Business School. You can't really argue with that. And another one went to go work at a startup, and we run an accelerator, so I get it. And so that's what ends up happening. We love everyone, but that's just how it worked. And it's interesting because I think that as a woman in finance, you just look at the candidates and then you pick them based on kind of their qualities and et cetera. And those are the guys who've risen to the top, no pun intended. So yeah, our team is very women heavy. We'd love to hire a man. If anybody's interested, let me know.
I love that reverse, that we'd love to hire men, so please send in your applications.
Exactly.
Especially white men, send in your applications.
Please, please.
I think that's hysterical. Because I was going to ask you if you found a difference. We talk about diversity being good for business in general, and you are at Morgan Stanley and understand the financial implications of diversity being good for business. Why do we say diversity is good for business? Do you see that there is a financial benefit when you have diverse teams?
Yes, I would agree. I first of all would agree with diversity because I think that we're in the relationship business, so that's first and foremost. And if you don't have the relationships of the decision makers doing deals, then you're going to miss deals, and that ends up being revenue to your bottom line, or your top line that goes into your bottom line. And so from my standpoint, a diverse team is great because, for instance, we can't necessarily dictate who our clients are. Some of our clients may not be as well informed, as modern, and as accepting of modern day principles as we might be. But guess what? Then you've got a team where you can kind of design the team based on who the client is, if you have a team like that. We've certainly heard stories, obviously, particularly in banking, of the all-white male team that goes into the city of Atlanta and asks for business. And sitting across them is a diverse team, and it's like, really? Even still today? So it's one of these things where diversity on your team can help win business. That's number one. Can help think about perspectives. So we look at certain commercials that aired last year around certain topics and the vitriol that was displayed around them. And you say to yourself, who was around that table watching that and deciding that that was the right thing to do? And again, if you have different perspectives, people can give you the I'm from this type of background and I don't think that resonates well in this type of background. I am from this culture and I don't think it resonates well to talk about X, Y, or Z from a certain culture. And so that is helpful not only in making sure you don't mess things up, if you will, but it's also helpful in saying, hey, I know so-and-so, it's the first day of Ramadan, why don't we go and say, happy, I don't know if it's happy, so excuse me guys for people, but acknowledge that's the first day of Ramadan, and then that might actually be the kicker that gets you in the door to have the right relationship to get the deal done. So that's how we think about it, and that's why I think it's important.
I think that's just so interesting, just using the Ramadan example. Like if you really did goof on something like that. I mean, I remember early on, I've been in advertising and marketing and research for over 35 years, a really long time. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was it was for an oatmeal brand. I don't know if you remember this, and it was so successful, the advertising for the oatmeal brand in the United States. And so they decided to roll out that same ad globally. And it was the first time I started thinking about cultural fit. And they rolled it out in some of the Nordic countries, and it flopped. And the US team couldn't really figure out why it flopped, only to realize that, of course, they were marketing it as a breakfast cereal, and in the Nordic countries, they ate it in the afternoon as a snack.
Right.
So they were positioning it completely inappropriately. That was a cultural miss.
Correct.
So have you been, here you are, a woman in the wealth management, arena, which is also unusual. There's not a very, what's the percentage of women at the top in wealth management?
It's small. It's small. I think Shelley Project outed us a little bit, Morgan Stanley. I think it's small in wealth management. I think it's small in investment banking. I think it's small in financial services, period, unfortunately. We hope that it gets better.
So have you had an experience where you felt like a woman in your business, where you felt discriminated against, or that you realized you were getting paid 30% less than men, or any of those experiences?
So I must tell you, I am probably an anomaly based on some of the things I've just mentioned. I have not had a negative experience with respect to me being a woman, me being a black woman, at Morgan Stanley and in the business. I have had the following. I used to cover oil and gas, and so we would go to oil country in the United States, and my team was largely male and white, and I was the black woman on the team. No big deal, nobody cared. We all went into meetings, and everybody remembered my name. Everybody, CEO, they'd be like, hey Alice, nice to see you again. And people were like, how does he remember you? And I wasn't even the senior person. It's like, well, how many black women has he seen come into the meeting?
That's awesome.
So it's one of these things that actually, it's an asset for me.
So you saw it as an opportunity versus a positive versus the negative.
Right, and so for me, call me naive. Look, I'm from Miami, Florida. I didn't grow up in that, banking environment. And I went to Morgan Stanley after I went to University of Miami. Sorry. And so I never really thought to myself, oh, this is all I'd have to overcome in order to be successful in the business. I just said, here's kind of what I am. You're either going to like me or I'm going to find other people to like me. And it is what it is. So I think that some of that naivete actually ingrained itself into my kind of work style. And so I've just never really looked at these situations like that. And as I said, look, I can't control what people think about me in terms of their own personal biases, but I'm going to be the way that I'm going to be, and then we'll see how it works. And so luckily, knock on wood, there's none here, but we'll pretend this is, I just haven't had those experiences. It's not to say that other people haven't, and so I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just have been lucky enough never really to have been subject to that in my career.
So let's think about that. So you've been very fortunate to not have those experiences, so your confidence or that voice in your head hasn't told you to not do this or not do that, because you've been fortunate to push yourself forward and take negative and turn it into positive, right, or not necessarily even have a negative experience. We always say you need to fail to succeed. That's how we all evolve. I'd love to hear about your favorite failure. Give me a favorite failure. I mean, we've all messed up and learned from it. Give me a favorite one.
I'm perfect.
I love that. I love that. Well, first of all, we say perfection is boring, and you are far from boring. So Tell me about the imperfection that makes you perfect.
Of course, no, I'm absolutely 100% joking. So,
No, but I actually like that you said you're perfect.
Perfect.
A lot of women will not brag about themselves. So high five, girl. That's
Thank
a good
you.
one.
Thank you.
I like it.
yeah, I'm perfect. So, and the one thing that I've done ever, the one thing that I've done ever in my life, the one. So yeah, I think a lot of it is around, again, finding your voice. And again, you talk about authenticity. I feel like I bring my authentic self to work every day. You can ask my coworkers. They probably also feel that I bring my authentic self to work every day. But also, you have to manage your career. And so some of the best advice that I've ever gotten, and so obviously some of the best advice that I give, is around no one cares about your career as much as you do. No one. Zero. That's it. It's you. And so you have to be open and honest with what you want. You have to manage other people to manage you well. You have to, for the difficult boss, you have to get them on your side regardless. And it could be a whole lot of reasons. Maybe they hate me. Maybe I'm this. Maybe I'm a woman. Maybe I'm black. Maybe, but guess what? It doesn't matter because I'm not going to get what I want if I continue to be held back by some of this stuff. So it's just being very vocal around, and I've had to learn that. And so I would say one of probably my biggest mistakes that I think about at work is, assuming that your manager always has your back in every situation. And that's not necessarily true. You have to pipe up and you have to say, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is what I want to work on. Hey, can I work on this? Hey, can I work on that? Let somebody tap you on the shoulder and tell you, relax. Let somebody tap you on the shoulder and say, that's not for you to do. Apologize. Don't ask for permission, right? So that's what I would say.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ask for forgiveness later.
Ask for
right?
forgiveness later.
100%. I think that's so awesome. Have you found there's a difference between a male and female boss? I mean, have you had both?
I've had both, actually. And again, there are, and I've seen this. So it hasn't necessarily been my experience, but I've seen sometimes female bosses are harder on the folks that they work with. I had that probably once in my career, and I ended up turning this woman into a big fan of mine because I just gave her what she wanted. And so it was like, I gave you what you wanted, and then at some point you get the ability to push back because she realizes that you're good, right? I've had
You're
bosses.
great.
You're great. You're perfect.
Perfect.
Right.
You're perfect.
You're perfect. I've had male bosses who like to coddle, and you just have to sit down and say, I'm not a baby. I'm not a baby. So was this not good? Was this right? Give me the feedback. And I can take it, and I'm a big girl. And I'll never forget the one time I got the first time I got pure, unadulterated feedback from one of my male bosses. And I was just like,
Yeah.
he was like, are you okay? I was like, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you. You never have to worry about giving me feedback. Anytime, I'll take it. And it was a bit jarring.
What was the biggest issue he had with you?
It was the work. Like, it literally was the work. It was like, you didn't do this, you didn't communicate this, this is why this came out this way, and this can't happen again, and et cetera. And I was like, you are right. And instead of saying, but this is what happened, it was this person's fault, and this one over here, and that one didn't check it, but then you told me to do, I just said, you're right. Thank you. You're absolutely right. This will never, ever happen again. And we're good. And the next day he was like, I know I was a little hard on you. I was like, you never have to worry about giving me feedback ever, ever.
Oh, good for you.
I want you to understand that. Because you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
If you
So
don't
you did
take
agree
it.
with him. You didn't just say you're right. You actually agreed.
No,
with
he
him.
was right.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't agree with him right then in that moment.
But-
but I took it. I took it. I literally said, there was a part of me that said, shh, stop. Say thank you. And I said, you are right. Thank you. It'll never happen again. And I was like, I can't believe you did that. But then when I went back and actually, he was right. I mean, we can excuse things away all day. We can defend things to make ourselves feel good. But at the end of the day, we're a results-oriented society. We didn't get the results. Here's what happened in his purview. Really, that doesn't matter. We didn't get the results. So how do we get the results we want next time? And so.
Well, gosh, you're so in the financial, side of the business of it's results. In advertising, there's always gray.
Right.
And my first review was not quite the same. I got a really terrible. I thought I was perfect too. I stayed late. I said yes. I helped everybody, and I came in, walked in, thinking I'm getting a raise, and this guy ripped me to shreds. And I remember looking at him, thinking, Okay, well, I'm 27 years old at the time. I'm supposed to agree, but I didn't. And it was that voice saying, okay, just say yes, you're right, but he was wrong. And so I remember saying to him, you are so wrong.
I've done that too.
I said, and one day you're gonna look back and tell me you're sorry, right? And he wrote me this 4-page letter of like, there was very few pros about me and like all these cons. And I'm like, shit, I kept it.
Right.
Because it really pissed me off.
Yep.
And I kept this, I still have it today. I saw it, and I saw him recently, and we talked about it, and it was awesome.
Did he agree?
Oh, 100%.
That's awesome.
And I said, you were so wrong, because he punished me for taking clients out to lunch too much and spending too much time out of the office, but it was about relationships,
Yeah, that's
but he didn't get it at the time.
Yeah.
So my boss, I told him, you're wrong, blah, 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 blah. So you probably handled it better.
I've definitely told folks, respectfully, we're going to do what you want to do, but I don't agree.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So what pisses you off? I mean, when you look at the Fortune 500 companies today, if I asked you, you could change 3 things. 1 thing, 2 things, or 3 things. I'll give you a choice. 1, 2, or 3. What would you change? What rules do you want to break and rewrite?
That's a good question. I would like to see a lot more around diversity and inclusion. I mean, we talk about it as a buzzword, but I do think that lack of opportunity holds us all back. So I think that without understanding every employee's highest and best use, and you see it everywhere, no one takes a white sheet of paper and says, this is this person's highest and best use all across the board. You say, okay, these are kind of my friends, these are my homegirls, this is my crew over here, we're gonna make sure everybody's good, and then I'll figure out what happens to the rest of these folks who aren't in my tribe. That really stymies a corporation, any corporation. It stymies groups, it stymies morale, and you eventually don't push forward. And so that's probably something I'd like to see a lot more of. Real, if we're gonna talk about meritocracies, real meritocracies. If we're not, then that's fine, and we just have to understand that you may not get the best talent and et cetera, but let's just own up to what we're doing. That probably is another thing that is annoying. I just want everybody to, don't put practices in place for practice's sake, because no one's going to buy into them anyway. If we're going to do it, let's do it earnestly.
That's a good one. You talked about diversity and inclusivity as buzzwords. Are they buzzwords? Because I'm sick of the words. I mean, first we had a Chief Human Resource Officer, CHRO. Then we had a Chief Diversity Officer, a CDO. Then we moved to a Chief Inclusivity Officer, a CIO. Then we went to a Chief Diversity and Inclusivity Officer, CDIO. And now, I mean, I just think it should be like a Chief Belonging Officer, where we stop talking about diversity, which separates, inclusivity, to force us to come together. I mean, are they buzzwords, or are they real words? Are we really doing something with those? Or?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard topic. I've read, if you're interested, you can take a look at the New York Times. There have been articles written about diversity being the new D word. And people hear it, and it makes people uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about it. So it's literally as offensive as saying an offensive word to some people. And I think that's because some of us are just going through the motions and not working with real inclusiveness and inclusion and diversity in a practical way, in a way that's honest and open, which means really being able to have difficult conversations. And so until we're able to deal with the difficulty in the conversation, and until people feel safe spaces to say what they want to say, and be okay in it, whether or not I agree with your point, we're still gonna have this issue. I think the focus is important, but I think it's getting lost in kind of just humdrumness. That's not really a word, but
I like humdrumness. I think that's why we have to change the words, because it pushes us. A new lexicon gets our mindset thinking very differently.
Well, I would say, so that's one of the reasons we call our innovation lab the Multicultural Innovation Lab. And people are like, isn't it just diversity? And it's like, no, it's multicultural. And it's funny because when you start talking about multicultural client strategy, which is a larger part of our team at Morgan Stanley, people start saying, oh, well, are Asians considered multicultural? Do you hear yourself? Yes. Like, yes.
Right.
And it's like, well, they're not diverse. It's like, I never said diversity. I said multicultural. And that just, it opens up the world in a way that's not this focus, like, and it's interesting. I mean, people have thoughts that sit back here that come out in questions around diversity, and it's amazing to see people's unconscious bias when you just say, let's unpack that a little bit more. What do you mean by that? Let me understand this a little bit more. Say that one more time. How do you think? Well, why do you think that way? And it's interesting. Some people think diversity is economic differences. Some people think diversity is blacks and Hispanics. Some people think that diversity is who knows what else. Different schools that you came from, tier 1 versus tier 2. So it really, again, we have to kind of frame the situation. So that's why we think about it in the way that we think about it. Because
I think it's really smart. I mean, I was just at the United Nations 2 days ago, and the buzzword was intersectionality. You know, starting to, you know, have that conversation with intersectionality. I want to talk to you about a lexicon, because that's the other thing that, you know, we talk about, not an inclusion or diverse innovation lab, it's a multicultural innovation lab. Is innovation another word for STEM or technology?
yes.
You know, so are you also using that so that you attract more, you know, we have a lot of problem with women in tech. Are you unpacking that too, to use your words, to get more, you know, women to opt in to innovation?
I think it's to get more people to participate, right? Because you get to a point as an entrepreneur of color or potentially a woman where you say, I'm not going to get funded, I don't get this money, there are problems with me raising, I have issues, I'm not really sure why, and sometimes they're valid and sometimes they may not be valid. But the whole point is for us, given the historical lack of funding there is for early stage companies, if you just look at the data, quite frankly, there's a market inefficiency there. And so first of all, yes, we want to get away from the right thing to do. There's a real business opportunity here in the sense that if we're looking at folks who have never been looked at and their ideas are just as good, sometimes better, and all they can't get is funding and access to the right folks and networks, why don't we give them that and see what happens to their companies? And we end up making an even better return. So we are in our second cohort for this year. Last year we had 5 companies come in. One of them got acquired while they were in the lab. One of them has 3 buyers circling now. Another one had to literally stop fundraising and will do a Series A on the back of their fundraising. Another one had a Fortune 10 company sign on with them. And then another one just got accepted into one of our sister companies that we work with in their lab and got a lot of funding as well.
That's amazing.
Right?
I mean, so I'm a young entrepreneur, which we have plenty of them, I'm sure, here. How do we get involved in your innovation lab? I want to be chosen.
Yes.
How do you pick me? Pick me.
So so if you're interested, you can go to
We are.
www.morganstanley.com/MCIL. And it'll give you a lot of information around what the lab does. But we will hold open application period again towards the end of the year, the beginning of next year, and then bring in the entrepreneurs from then. So our process this year, we had the open application process. We had 300 applications for 10 slots. Then we evaluated them with our Morgan Stanley colleagues, took that list down, brought in 20 finalists, and chose 10 companies.
So what do you look for? I mean, we have a minute left. I can't really see the screen, but what do you look for? Like if you have hundreds of applications and you choose 5, what's the top 10 list? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing I would say is the 5 could have easily been the top 30 in that group. And I would say even for this, the top 10 could have easily been the top 50 or 60 companies because they're all fantastic. And you're right, I think at this point it's a little bit easier to get into Harvard than it is to get into the lab. But we want to be helpful to everyone. So what we try
That's
to
interesting.
I know. I actually did the math on that because
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm a geek. I was like,
'Cause
it's
you are-
Actually harder to get into the lab than Harvard.
That's
so that just shows you how much demand there is for and the need for early stage capital. But what we tend to look for is product in place, market solving problem, a product that fits a market problem, and then we tend to look at the CEO and the founders and make sure they have the right experience and that they're addressing a market. Revenues would be nice, a strong beta pipeline, and customers are pretty good. We're a little bit further along than an idea on paper. And we want you to have had some fundraising experience, whether it's through friends and family, which is your first initial raises, or with one institution. Generally, the companies that come into our lab we're either the first institution or there might be one maybe 2 institutions that might have been accelerators. So that's what we tend to look at, and then it's just relatively speaking, so then it's everything else that an investor would look at in terms of the growth of the market and how much growth you're experiencing and what your particular sector is and do you have the right expertise. And really I think what sets what we're doing apart is, are you the natural owner to solve this problem? And it's interesting, so just piece of advice from some of my work that we've done with some of our entrepreneurs, just ask yourself, why am I the right person to bring this idea to fruition? There has to be some expertise behind it or some personal issue. So that'd be kind of the culmination of what we look for.
That's amazing. I just invested, and I'm not an innovation lab, and I'm certainly not Morgan Stanley, but I would love to talk about that. And I just invested $25,000 in a 12-year-old little girl who created technology that eliminates lead from water.
That's amazing.
And when you say, why her?
Right.
Because I asked her that question.
Yes, please.
And I'm not trained like you are, but I mean, authentically, I just said, why? And she lives in Denver. She's from India. She said because Denver had a water problem, and she loved science, and she thought, let me see what I can do. And she created technology to eliminate lead from water. So you never know where you're going to find amazing innovation, but I really do understand that authentic voice of why me? Why should I be creating this?
That's right.
To win the game. So thank you so much for sharing such incredible insights. I don't know if we're allowed to get questions, and this light is so bright I can't see anybody anyway, so if you had your hand up, I couldn't see you. But we will be around if anyone wants to find out how to get involved in the Innovation Lab, the Multicultural Innovation Lab.
That's
Thank
right.
you so much, Alice, for such a great conversation.
Thank you for having me,
Amazing.
Shelley. Thank you.